on the air tonight. Something crawls in the pale moonlight. Oh, turn on the radio, the Bruce Collins Show, the Bruce Collins Show, the Baron of Broadcasting. Oh, 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 the Bruce Collins Show. Chad Miles laughs, a wicked twisted sound. Aftermaths of souls that can't be found. Oh, turn on the radio, the Bruce Collins Show, the Bruce Collins Show, the Baron of Broadcasting. Oh, 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 the Bruce Collins Show. Chad Miles laughs, a wicked twisted sound. Aftermaths of souls that can't be found. Whoa, turn on the radio, the Bruce Collins Show, the Bruce Collins Show, the Baron of Broadcasting. Oh, 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 the Bruce Collins Show.
Welcome back to the Bruce Collins Show. We're very glad to have you join us. Tonight we'll be talking to Jared Knott, the best-selling author of the book series Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters. There's a book 1 and now book 2. Book 1 was actually on the best-selling list on Amazon for 4 years, so it's a pretty popular book. He's an international best-selling author, and I believe you'll find this discussion very interesting. And now let me introduce you to my co-host, Chad Miles. Chad is a political advisor specializing in technology issues. He has consulted with numerous candidates at the local, state, and federal levels. In 2006, Chad ran for a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives in Michigan's 14th Congressional District. While the campaign was ultimately unsuccessful, the experience was invaluable. As a political blogger, he has written regular postings for Right Michigan, Tech Republican, Hip Hop Republican, and the Michigan Minority Report. A native of Northeast Ohio, Chad volunteered for service in the Army in 1990. He served 7 years on active duty with the 82nd Airborne Division, 2nd Infantry Division, and the 5th Special Forces Group. His military service as an infantryman and intelligence analyst took him around the world with service in the countries of Jordan, Egypt, South Korea, and Panama. Chad is a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and the American Legion. Chad also likes to ask random people where to go to get a hot meal at a fair price. Well, who doesn't? Chad, welcome back to the Bruce Collins Show.
Hey, Bruce. Thanks for having me back.
It's been a few years. Do you know
It's
how
been a
many
while.
years it's been?
No. How
10
many?
years.
No.
Our last show was before Trump became president in his first term.
Wow. A bygone era.
And so I was just thinking about it. It took me 3 hours. I was thinking, how old was I back then? And then I subtracted 10.
Amazing.
So it's good to have you back. Now, do you have any questions for me now that we're back?
Yeah, did you remember to wear pants since we're on video now?
Yeah. That's an odd question, though. Have you been drinking the sauerkraut juice again?
No, I was thinking you might forget. Hey, by the way, I saw a man limping at the radio studio today. I think he might be a spy.
Chad, we can't do that stuff anymore. We can't make up phony people and gimmicks. We used to do that a lot, I know, in the program years ago. But now that we're on video, people can see us. We're on YouTube. They'll know it's fake. We just can't do that. We don't want to insult people's intelligence.
Okay. How are we going to spend our time on the opening segment then?
Well, let me tell you, I'm free to say what I want until the jury comes back with their decision.
What does that mean?
I refuse to answer on the grounds that it might incriminate me.
This could be a short segment.
You know, I had a homeless guy ask me for money, and I wanted to get him a job. But I couldn't think of one where you get drunk and defecate your underpants.
On second thought, you should probably consult an attorney.
You know, by the way, I've been drinking Seattle's Best today.
Oh, how is it?
I've never had second best, so I can't tell.
Bruce,
Yes?
I think it's time for the Chad Miles Report.
That being the case, I've been instructed by the legal department to issue the following. The Chad Miles Report is 98% accurate, and as Chad always says, who cares about the other 4%? Okay, Chad, take it away.
Okay, on January the 14th, as Spaniards gathered for the official Carnival Group's competition in Cadiz, 12 men dressed as scientist Stephen Hawking performed a choreographed musical number in motorized wheelchairs, the New York Post reported. The men were wearing wigs and outfits typical of the disabled genius, who died in 2018 of ALS, as they performed. Don't be offended, this is just for laughs, said Miguel Angel Lul, who wrote the lyrics to their songs. After the competition, the group planned to donate the dozen wheelchairs to ALS patients in need. They are real chairs that cost us 400 euros each, which is about 478 US dollars, Lowell said. This is according to the New York Post.
That's nuts. I mean, first of all, musical chairs.
Right.
But the fact that he says, don't be offended, you know, like, as you know, my mom passed away last year and she had dementia. I wouldn't so much be bothered by a skit about dementia. I'm not that triggered. You know, it might be in poor taste, obviously, but it wouldn't bother me. But when you put my mother as 12 women dressed up as my mother, acting like they have dementia, I mean, that's the height of bad taste. And especially if you're related to Stephen Hawking or he was your friend. Don't be offended.
I have to confess, I'm a little curious as to what this looks like, so I may look up the video.
Yeah. The other thing is, I like how, they say he was the Miguel Lul.
Miguel Angel Lul.
Yeah. What was he? The organizer?
He wrote the song.
So.
He wrote the song.
Oh, he wrote the song. Okay. So I like how in this interview with him, he's saying we're going to donate all these wheelchairs to ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, right? Which I didn't even know Stephen Hawking had Lou Gehrig's disease. That's interesting. I didn't know what he had, to be honest. But then he states this: they are real chairs. Like we suspected he was going to give fake chairs to ALS patients. What is a fake wheelchair? It doesn't have real wheels.
Don't worry, they're real.
Yeah.
Chairs.
That is a crazy Chad Miles story.
Well, you haven't heard number 2 yet, Bruce. For the low price of just $250,000, you can be one of the first to reserve a room at a luxury moon hotel.
Ooh.
The Philippine Star reported on January 21st. GRU Space, a startup founded by Skylar Chan, hopes to deploy the hotel to the moon by 2032. It will be built on Earth and
Yeah.
then
So
deployed to the moon.
just how many luxury moon hotels are there?
Well, there's going to be just one,
And
according
it,
to Skylar Chan. Do you think that's his
and
real
and
name?
do you suppose this is 250,000 US dollars or Philippine pesos? Either way, I don't think anybody's going to be able to afford this in the Philippines.
I don't know, but let's read on. The
Yes.
hotel offers views of the lunar landscape and Earth, along with surface experiences, including moonwalks, driving, golfing, and other activities, GRU
Now,
claims.
can I say one thing?
Sure.
Now, remember, this hotel does not exist, and he's telling us what's in the hotel.
What you can do.
I can tell anybody about my mansion that has 3 swimming pools.
Let me tell you about the amenities.
You know, what's that character John Lovitz used to do? Yeah, I've got this
that's the,
moon hotel.
that's the ticket. The first hotel, which is expected to last 10 years, will be an inflatable habitat
On the moon.
on the moon.
Where are you getting the oxygen?
There's some atmospheric pressure issues that I
How
don't
do you
think are going to work
inflate it?
out. After that, a more
Oh.
permanent and expanded facility will be placed.
I hope so.
We live during an inflection point where we can actually become interplanetary before we die, Chan said. GRU believes likely customers will include adventurers, couples looking to honeymoon, pun intended, in an exotic locale, and recent spaceflight participants.
I like how he says we can become interplanetary before we die, but if the inflatable habitat should leak, you may die interplanetary.
Inflatable hotel
Yeah.
on the moon.
And nothing against anybody, but you know, the Philippines, they don't manufacture cars or, you know, big technology but they're going to space with a luxury hotel.
You better believe it. You better
Or
believe
as they say in the Philippines, I'm feeling like this is a bad idea.
Article number 3.
Okay.
PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, is nothing if not helpful. On January the 20th, the group sent a letter to Punxsutawney Groundhog Club president Tom Dunkel offering to donate a state-of-the-art 3D groundhog projection, or a hologram, if you will, for the big event coming up on February the 2nd. PETA said let Phil and his family retire. That's according to Fox News. That's
One of the
actually kind of
problems
cool.
that I have with this is that the whole Groundhog Day started in the late 1800s. So the real Punxsutawney Phil has retired. He's dead.
Long dead.
Yeah.
Long,
So
long gone.
I don't know. I'm not aware that the groundhog is abused, that the one that they just hold up and then they put him back down. Quite frankly, this is a moot discussion because I could care less if they do this tradition or not. But I
Yeah,
don't
me too.
think that I think PETA is like going a little overboard on one more situation.
They got to get that donor money.
Yeah. Apparently, they should be building the luxury moon hotel if they've got this hologram technology.
Right. That's a good. Hey, we should maybe Skylar Chan. We should
Yeah.
hook him up with PETA,
Might work.
and they could have a holographic hotel and an
Yeah.
inflatable groundhog.
Yeah,
I think it'll work out.
I think so.
Article number 4. A German practice is making its way to the United States. NBC Los Angeles reported on January 21st, Luften, which translates to airing out, but is also called house burping, involves opening doors and windows even in the dead of winter to bring in fresh air. Air quality professional Tony Abate is a fan. He said outside air can decrease concentrations of mold, contaminants, and carbon dioxide buildup. Optimal times to burp the house include the first thing in the morning, after showering or cooking, and after having visitors. And it doesn't take long. 10 minutes. No more than that is really necessary, according to Abate. This was from NBC News Los Angeles.
I like how they worded this one sentence. Air quality professional Tony Abate is a fan.
I know. Another pun.
He's not an air conditioner.
He's a fan.
He's a fan.
He's a fan.
So I don't know about you, but growing up, I mean, airing out a house was kind of a common thing. You know, you cook something and you air out the house, or, you know, I moved here. I moved to this condo 4 months ago. And when I first got here, it hadn't been occupied for quite a while. And not only did I air it out a little bit, it had a few desert bugs, which I won't mention. There was a big giant spider about this big. No joke. Yeah. And there was a cockroach, but I didn't want to mention.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I got the pest control here, so have not seen it. My cat saw the cockroach as a game.
Okay.
That's how I spotted the cockroach, is he was chasing it across the floor. And I was like, oh no, I've got to get pest control.
Well, good. I hope you took care of that problem.
So I think airing out is not a new thing. I'm surprised they're calling it house burping, considering we live in a woke society. That maybe that would be sort of, maybe we could just say house passing gas or something.
Mr. Abate is a fan.
Methane distribution.
Article number 5. In Duffel, Belgium, on January the 2nd, police were conducting a sobriety checkpoint when a car crept up to the officers. Oddity Central is reporting, so this ought to be good. The driver seemed unusually short and young, which follows because he was, in fact, the 12-year-old son of the front seat passenger, his dad. I had drunk too much, and so I entrusted the car to my son to drive home, Dad told the police. Well, he's a very well-spoken drunk man. I'll give you that.
I was just thinking that. I was just thinking, I'm sure he didn't say that, at least at that moment. He may have said that after about 12 hours.
I entrusted the car to my son to drive home. Police officer. Thank you very much.
I'm thinking of like Otis on Andy Griffith.
Yeah, right.
I had the kid do it. And then meanwhile, we haven't gotten to that point yet. There was another adult in the car.
Mom and 2 siblings were in the back seat. The boy was fined for driving without a license. Dad was charged with entrusting the car to someone not fit to drive it. And after the traffic stop, Mom drove the rest of the way home.
Yeah, you think maybe she should have done that before?
Probably, yeah. You should have led with that.
And how did he get drunk? Did the kids go to the bar with him? What was happening? What was happening in this situation?
There's many unanswered questions in this story.
Do you remember years ago? You may not, but wasn't there a guy that was in his car and he was taking a selfie and he got in a crash and killed himself? And then there was another guy, you know, in the old Chad Miles report, where you reported that he was taking a selfie holding a snake and it bit him, and I think he died. We had all kinds of crazy stuff like that.
We're back, baby. We're back.
Yeah. So I can just see this mom saying to the kid, guess what you're getting for Christmas? A car.
Let's go.
You obviously can drive better than your father.
Let's go pick up your well-spoken drunk father.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, Chad, thank you so much for the Chad Miles report. Once again, it was both edifying and educational.
You're welcome, Bruce. You're welcome.
All right. And we'll be back with our guest, Jared Knott. Don't go away. Okay, let me...
The odometer spins like a clock on fire. Captain Doomsday preaching from a rusty wire. Headlines scream, they twist, they bend. The truth's a mirror that'll never mend. Chat Miles whispers, Chat Miles shouts. The world's a circus, full of doubts. Curated chaos, the news on repeat. The Chat Miles report, where fiction meets the street. Spinning tales, breaking minds. The odometer ticks, truth's hard to find. Static buzzes through the midnight haze. Doomsday rants in his cryptic craze. Every mile a story, every spin a lie. A satellite blinks in the dying sky. Who's the captain? Who's the clown? Turn it up, turn it down. Words like thunder, truth like smoke. This report's the punchline of the joke. Curated chaos, the news on repeat. The Chat Miles report, where fiction meets the street. Spinning tales, breaking minds. The odometer ticks, truth's hard to find. 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 Static buzzes through the midnight haze. Doomsday rants in his cryptic craze. Every mile a story, every spin a lie. A satellite blinks in the dying sky. Who's the captain? Who's the clown? Turn it up, turn it down. Words like thunder, truth like smoke. This report's the punchline of the joke.
My guest tonight is Jared Knott. He's the author of Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, The Many Tiny Mistakes That Changed the World Forever, Books 1 and 2. Tonight we'll be talking about the current book, Book 2. This well-researched book takes you into the deep shadows, the black holes, the nooks and crannies to give you the facts behind the big events. Learn about mysteries and resolutions that you never knew existed. These puzzling situations and their outcomes, for better or worse, have determined the course of human history. Jared Knott has had numerous articles published in the Mensa Bulletin and in graduate school textbooks on subjects ranging from Supreme Court reform to Arctic exploration. That sounds interesting. He was a decorated combat infantry officer in Vietnam in the 1st Air Cavalry Division. In his civilian career, he has served as a vice president of sales and marketing director in the home improvement industry. A father of 5, he lives in the Atlanta area with his wife, Catherine. The website for the book is tinyblundersbigdisasters.com. This book series has won all sorts of awards, and it's a pleasure to speak to Jared tonight. I'm going to show you the cover of the book, Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, Book 2, The Many Tiny Mistakes That Changed the World Forever, again by Jared Knott. Jared Knott, welcome to the Bruce Collins Show.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on. Now, what inspired you to write these books on tiny blunders?
Yes, it kind of it's more than one inspiration, but there's the old quotation coming down through Benjamin Franklin that for one of the nail, the shoe was lost. For one of the shoe, the rider was lost. One of the rider, the battle was lost. One of the battle, the empire was lost. The empire was lost, all for the want of a nail. But it's a nice old saying, but how often does that really happen? A tiny mistake causes an entire empire to collapse. You will be amazed over and over again how that tiny mistake dominoes, multiplies, and ends up creating disaster at the very end. And that's what the two books are all about.
You know, it's interesting when I read your book, the opposite is true too, because I read about Bill Gates in the book, The Psychology of Money. And it talks about how he was a genius, and we think of him as a smart guy. Of course, some of the proprietary technology was taken from a company I used to work for, Xerox. Mm-hmm. But also, he was an attendee, a student of one of the few schools in Washington State that had computers at the time. Mm-hmm. So I guess from a theological perspective, a bigger issue is, are these actually blunders? But we won't get into that tonight. I know maybe your book doesn't delve quite that far, but you do, in at least book one, talk about the butterfly effect. What's the butterfly effect?
Yes, there was a mathematician who, there is no Nobel Award for mathematics, but if there were one, Professor Lorenz would have won it, a master mathematician. And he was, back in the 1950s, he was working with a number. It was a number, and the decimal had 18 small numbers behind it. And it was taking the computers of the day a long, long time to run this number, run this analysis. So he said, gee whiz, 18 numbers, let's just whack off the last 6 at the end. And they're very tiny numbers. It won't make much difference. Well, he ran the computer, and he was amazed how it made a dramatic difference in the final outcome of the analysis for the weather. He was saying that this would mean that it sets off a chain reaction, and that would mean that a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil could set off a chain reaction that a year and a half later would end up with a cyclone in Texas. And he made this presentation to a big convention of mathematicians, and of course that was the birth of the butterfly effect, which of course takes place in history, where a tiny mistake holds the theme there again, multiplies dominoes, and 6 months later, or a month later, or sometimes just several weeks later, has this horrible, horrible disaster. It's somewhat analogous to if you're leaving Portland, Oregon, and you're going to be trying to make it to London, and your compass is off by just a half a degree. You may end up in Portugal, or you may end up in North Africa, or something like that. It's not exactly the same thing, but it's the same general principle.
It sort of reminds me of people. I was thinking of this when you were speaking about sailing. I've never been a sailboat operator, but those who talk about it, if they're a little bit off in their navigation, at first it doesn't seem like you're too far away. You can still see the island or the target, but the further out you go, the farther apart you are from the actual target that you intended to be.
Yes. We have a
hitting.
chapter of the second book. It indirectly touches on what you're talking about there, and that's Christopher Columbus's magnificent mistake. And that's a whole long story, but he thought that the world was only 75% as big as it really was. He thought the difference between the Canary Islands and Japan was only about 2,200 miles. We needed to get to the Spice Islands because it had been, Silk Road had been closed down by the Ottoman Empire. And so just by sailing 2,200 miles to the west, we'll get there to all these Spice Islands and come back with these riches, blah, blah, blah. Of course, it's calculated. There's a story about why he was so goofed up. But anyway, that tiny mistake, of course, had, both bad and very good repercussions. The good repercussion, obviously, he's discovered the New World. And the bad repercussion is that hundreds of thousands and millions of Native Americans died when they became exposed to the European diseases. And that for them it was a massive tragedy, but that's a whole other story. I might also point out that, as you kind of touched on, sometimes tiny mistakes can have very good outcomes. Usually it's bad, but sometimes it's good. One of my favorite stories there regards Professor Fleming at the Mary's Hospital in 1928, and he was known for being a slob and keeping a very messy laboratory. He was going on vacation in Scotland for 2 weeks, and he left the window in his laboratory open, and he had these dishes, dirty dishes, petri dishes, smeared with bacteria, left them scattered on the counter there. Well, I'll clean it up when I get back. So he walks off with this messy, sloppy laboratory. Well, he comes back, and it's discovered that apparently a spore, it was a penicillin spore, blows in through the window, lands in one of the dishes, okay, and he comes back and discovers, whoa, look, where it's landed and it's growing inside the dish, it's killed all of the bacteria around it, the big halo around it.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, a gigantic epiphany, okay, one of the biggest turning points in the history of mankind, the discovery of penicillin, the discovery of antibiotics, and it took 9 years from there. A lot of development, a lot of assistance from Professor Forey over at Oxford, et cetera, et cetera. But we had this massive breakthrough, and it saved hundreds of millions, and really maybe even as many as 1 billion lives because of it. Professor Fleming was such a slob. He's got the patron saint of slobs everywhere. And my wife would sometimes agree that I belong to that category. But that's a tiny mistake that led to a fabulous, fabulous outcome.
Interesting. Again, today we're talking about this book, Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, Book 2. But I want to, for those who may want to buy both books, can you talk a little bit about Book 1, maybe some bullet points? Give us a sampling of some of the historical events you delve into in that book.
Yes, I'll give you two real quickly. One of them is the Titanic. And when they were maiden voyage of this beautiful, magnificent ship, but they changed second officers shortly before the launch, the cruise was made. In the process, the leaving officer forgot to pass on the key to a locker to the new officer. Well, that meant the glasses, the binoculars, were apparently down in that locker, and they had no way to open it up. So the people up in the crow's nest, the two men up there, were trying to observe, looking for icebergs in the Atlantic at night with just the naked eye. And the particular iceberg in question was a black iceberg, having a dark iceberg, and they missed it. And of course, the whole story, tragedy of the Titanic takes place. One of the gentlemen survived, and in the investigation afterwards in New York, what happened, I don't know. How much of a difference would that have made? Well, we would have seen the iceberg much sooner. How much sooner? Well, plenty of time to have gotten out of the way. So if they just had the binoculars up there in the crow's nest, they would have seen, oh, here's a iceberg up there, called down to the ship's direction system, and gone to port and missed the whole thing, and the entire tragedy would not have taken place if they just passed the key along and they had to open up the locker and they have the glasses in their hand. So that's the one tiny mistake. Another one, here's the teaser. A single piece of tape rotated several inches the wrong direction, changed the outcome of the Vietnam War. The United States might very well have won, except for this single tiny mistake. And that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Every piece of tape, what are we talking about? It has to do with the Watergate break-in. And James McCord and the Cuban operatives were breaking into the Watergate office complex. They were told to hold the striker of the door down with a single piece of tape in the vertical position. They made a mistake and they put it in a horizontal position. What difference does that make? Well, Frank Wills, the night watchman, comes walking along, okay, doing his rounds as he should at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he sees the tape on the door. Well, tape on the door, well, the door has been jimmied. Calls the Washington, D.C. police. And there's a strong rumor that the uniformed officer on duty in that part of the city that night was intoxicated in a local bar and unable to answer the call. So they had to send the bum patrol, 3 officers dressed as hobos, in a jalopy car. They pull up to the Watergate complex. The lookout does not recognize them as officers. They come in there, they arrest James McCord, they arrest the Cuban operatives. The whole Watergate complex scandal begins. Boom, boom, boom. And Henry Kissinger gave an interview on television. He said they just signed the treaty with the North Vietnamese. He said he knew that the North Vietnamese were going to be violating the treaty. The plan was to go in and bomb the daylights out of them again when they started to do that, and so they control the situation. But they were so weak politically because of Watergate they couldn't. South Vietnam collapses, Nixon administration collapses, all falls apart because a single piece of tape rotated several inches in the wrong direction and a drunk cop.
Fascinating. So, in your new book, Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, Book 2, is there one historical figure above the others in your book that you wish you could go back in time and ask them what they were thinking?
Yes, so when you ask that question, the figure that comes to mind is not a heroic figure. In fact, he's sort of a, what would you call him? He was a kind of a reckless, explosive figure. But the teaser for that story is this. What colorful character bought stolen horses from Comanche Indians using counterfeit money? What could possibly go wrong? Okay, this set off a chain of events with a major impact on the history of the southwestern United States. John Wayne later played this very colorful character in a John Ford movie with the help of Natalie Wood. And that the character is James Parker. He was the uncle of a lady who was a young woman who was at the age of 9 was what they had done. They made a mistake and left the gates at Fort Parker wide open, a family fort, which was a well-built fort, had a bulletproof front gate, but they forgot and left the gate wide open. So the Comanches come back for revenge, having been sold. They sold horses and paid for Ford counterfeit money. They came back for revenge, and so they killed a lot of the people there, and they captured the young 9-year-old girl who went off to be raised with the Comanche. She had blue eyes. She was the wife of a Comanche chief, and she had 3 children. One of whom was Juana Parker, who later became one of the leaders of the Comanche tribe, and it changed the outcome of the events in the Southwest. And I'd like to be asking James Parker, what in the hell were you thinking? What in the heck were you doing? Which you counterfeit money, trading horses, buying horses with the Indians, or all like that. Why wasn't the gate closed? And also, why didn't they have the proper weapons? They got in an argument with the government of Texas. They were supposed to be supplied with weapons, okay, because they were Texas Rangers, but the Texas didn't come through with the weapons. So out of spite, they just didn't buy any weapons at all. Okay, we'll show you. We won't get any weapons. Okay, if the Comanche attack your fort, which you left unlocked in the front there, you have no proper weapons to defend yourself, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the what the heck were you thinking kind of thing. And he's not an admirable figure. He was accused of being a crook and also a counterfeiter, and also accused of murder, serial murders. So he's kind of a scoundrel. And he was played that way by John Wayne in the movie. He's kind of an outrageous type character, but he would be interesting to say the least.
Yeah. So, can you give us a background on the massive mistake that caused the sinking of the Bismarck?
Yes, and that one, the feedback I'm getting from the readers is that is their favorite chapter. Okay, it's getting people that because it's interesting. I point out in the book, different than any other war, any other event in World War II, it's a series of mistakes on the part of the British and a series of mistakes on the part of the Germans. It was kind of a battle of mistakes. Who was going to make the biggest mistake and end up with the mistake at the end that determined the outcome? But it began, they did not fuel the Bismarck fully. There was a mistake made, kind of a mechanical or clerical mistake was made, so it was not fully fueled, which would not have made that much of a difference except other events that made it very important. And then the Hood, the chief battleship of the British, had a weakness that it did not have enough surface armor, and this new technique of plunging fire, where they would shoot the rounds way up in the air, and they would turn, they would come down with enormous velocity and hit ships kind of at a perpendicular level. In order to deal with something like that, you need very strong plates on the surface of the battleship. They knew that we had a weakness there, the British did, and they never got around to correcting that between World War I and World War II. So in the early exchange between the Bismarck and the Hood, sure enough, the plunging fire round hits the Hood in just a few minutes, blows the entire ship up. All but 2 men are lost, and a huge defeat for the British Army. That was the pride of the British Navy, HMS Hood. And so that's a big mistake on their part. Then the British are chasing the Bismarck, and the captain of the British ship, the Bismarck, made some mistake. He's told by his Paris headquarters, don't send us any radio communications, but I think you've given the British the slip in the storm there, You're going right, left. You've lost you. They don't know where you are. What do you people know? I don't know. He didn't have much respect for their opinion. I'll make these decisions. So he sent these long transmissions back from the Atlantic, and sure enough, the British pick it up, and he said that's a terrible example of by not maintaining radio silence. But the British make another mistake. They make a mathematical mistake, and they think he's heading north, going back to the way he came. But actually, he's going southwest. So for 7 hours, he gets a leeway to be able to escape the British. They discover their mistake. Then they turn around and try to track him down. And then the aircraft carrier, the Ark Royal, has these very slow biplanes that it launches to go and try to attack the Bismarck. And they were told there were no British ships in the area. However, they were wrong. In the storm there was the British ship, the Sheffield. The pilots mistake it for the Bismarck, and here they go in and they drop their torpedoes, and they almost sank a British ship. However, there was another mistake. The torpedoes didn't malfunction. It was a new kind of magnetic triggering device, and it malfunctioned, so no damage was done to the Sheffield. That would have been a terrible disaster, sink one of your own ships. They go back and they rearm with the old kind of contact torpedoes. They take off. This time they find the Bismarck, and they hit her twice. The first one, torpedo hits, it does moderate damage, but the second one hits and damages the rudder, and the Bismarck can only travel in a giant circle. So, and then the British were able to close in and to sink it. But it was also another mistake. The German submarine had the Ark Royal in its sights, but they had not saved back any torpedoes. They'd used all the torpedoes. So here's this glorious target they can't even hit right in front of them. So just kind of one mistake, then another mistake, and there are others in this series of mistakes. And so finally, in the end, the Germans make more mistakes than the British, and the Bismarck is sunk. But it's a fascinating story, the Terror of the Seas. And if they didn't sink the Bismarck, she could have disrupted the convoys coming to Britain that Britain depended on for its survival. It does not have any arable land, does not have any petroleum, so it has to depend on these convoys coming in for survival. And so it was a critical battle in World War I. So.
And again, we're speaking with Jared Knott. He's the international best-selling author of Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, Book 2. And of course, there's a Book 1. And you can find out more information about this book at tinyblundersbigdisasters.com. Excellent book. I recommend it. We obviously can't touch on everything. You have a whole section on military mistakes. Can you maybe touch on one of those stories in that section?
Yes, there's a number of different mistakes that are made. We have a section on political mistakes. We have a section on navigational mistakes. There's of course, the Charge of Light Brigade is mentioned in the book number 1. But here's something kind of interesting. It does not receive a lot of publicity, but Hitler sometimes he had a list of them. He wrote a whole book on major mistakes made by Adolf Hitler. But one of them was these. He made a lot of emotional decisions, and he wanted vengeance. And the V1s and the V2s were named V for vengeance. It's going to try to blow up as many British as possible. Well, he had the V1, which is like a buzz bomb, and they found a solution to the V1 because they had the British had their own jet, and they were able to come in and shoot it down. It was going slow enough, about 450 miles an hour, that could be shot down. But then the V2, supersonic, it was the first man-made object to go into outer space. It would go up 60 miles, turn around and come down vertically, with extreme velocity, and there was no way the British could stop it. But Hitler made a tiny mistake, or he called it a big mistake, because he wanted to inflict as much pain on the British as possible. He wanted to blow up school buses, he wanted to kill grandmothers, he wanted to kill school children, so he directed that the B-1 and B-2 be directed at London. We wanted to make them bleed and suffer as much as possible. After the war, Eisenhower said well after the war that if the V-1s and V-2s had been directed at Plymouth and the other embarkation points for the D-Day invasion, the invasion would have to have been postponed. Well, they began a week after the invasion had taken place, which meant that all the gas, I'll tell you a quick anecdote, Eisenhower was driving through Plymouth with his son John, who just graduated from West Point. And John was looking around, whoa, massive amounts of gasoline, massive amounts of trucks, massive amounts of supplies. Here's all the weapons, here's all the tanks, here's everything. It's a good thing we have control of the air, he said, or the Germans could inflict massive damage on all the material needed for the D-Day invasion. And Eisenhower so irritably said, if we didn't have control of the air, I would not allow this big buildup to take place. And he was thinking about typical bombers and fighter bombers. He knew nothing about missiles. He knew nothing about the V-1 and V-2. And he said after the war, if Hitler had directed the V-1 and V-2 at Plymouth, again, the entire invasion would have to be called off, or to be started a week earlier, they would have collapsed. And that would have made a huge difference in the direction of the war. Now, does that mean that the Germans would have won? Well, no, because the atomic bomb is in the pipeline. It might have meant that the atomic bomb would be dropped on Munich or Berlin instead of on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So we would have won anyway, but the direction of the war would certainly have been a different outcome because of an emotional decision on the part of Hitler, who made a lot of stupid mistakes.
You touch on the Nixon-Kennedy debate. In fact, there's a whole chapter, and there's also a bribe involved in that chapter. Can you talk about that?
Yes, and whenever I cite something that's extremely pivotal, I go back to the source because it's going to be controversial. And Seymour Hersh, in his book, The Dark Side of Camelot, told this story that there was an industrialist, a Romanian industrialist, who gave Richard Nixon a check for $100,000, I think was deposited in the Bank of California. And in exchange, apparently, for that $100,000, which is a lot of money back in the early 1950s, Nixon had introduced a bill to allow the industrialist to stay in the United States. That Immigration Service was trying to deport him. Nixon introduced this bill which allowed him to stay in the United States in spite of these efforts. Manuel Sellers over in the House of Representatives, the Democrats, said something was fishy about this, and he blocked that bill from going through. But nevertheless, through other means, he was allowed to stay in the United States. But apparently, Richard Nixon took a $100,000 bribe in order to introduce this bill so that this industrialist could stay in the United States. Now, the CIA found out about it and had a copy of this check. And Nixon and CIA always had a very testy relationship or non-relationship over the years. J. Edgar Hoover apparently also knew about it also. And Nixon, when he was president, was in the process of firing Hoover. But Hoover may have used that knowledge to kind of say, well, yeah, try to fire me and the world's going to know about this check. It was never revealed during Nixon's lifetime. It was always something that haunted him during his presidency. By the way, I point out in that chapter that Nixon actually was a very good president. He has an excellent record. The list of accomplishments is one seldom equal to the presidents of the United States in history. So he's actually in some ways a very good president, but at the same time, he was not a particularly honest one in that situation. So that's one of those strange quirks in history.
Yeah, we might say. I remember my grandparents when I was a kid saying he was a great president, but of course we know he had some moral failings or misjudgments at least. Mm-hmm. Bribes obviously are a problem. So you've obviously written 2 books of Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters. Of all the stories you've gleaned from history, is there one or two maybe that disturb you the most?
Yes, the one that in some ways is the most significant, it takes me back to Christopher Columbus, which, by the way, was not the first European to discover the New World. He definitely was not. He was, however, the first European to discover the New World after the invention of the printing press system by Gutenberg. And Mark Twain has said, many other people have said, one of the biggest inflection points, turning points in all of history was the printing press system. And Gutenberg was not the first person to come up with the idea of movable type over in the Far East in China. It had been invented also, but it was a printing press system that was so effective, and it changed things enormously. literacy was then became widespread. The Renaissance came as a result of all this literacy, and word and information could be spread throughout the civilized world very rapidly, and institutional memory was created. So, and word about the New World spread quickly and broadly. So that's one of the very important points. But going back to Christopher Columbus, I can tell kind of a summarized version of this. But it had been known way back from in the library, the great library in Alexandria. They had figured out not only that the world was round, but also they could calculate the approximate size based on the rays of the sun. And I could go into that, I won't go into detail on that, but Eratosthenes was the person that figured it out. Not only did he figure out the size of the Earth, but also was able to calculate the tilt of the Earth, which is about a 17% tilt. Well, for some reason, Christopher Columbus ignored his findings. Marius of Tyre, who had done calculations and said that the world was smaller than what had been determined by the Great Library. And on top of that, Christopher Columbus used a European yard instead of a Arabic yard, which made the calculations even worse. And again, that's why he thought the world was only 75% as big as it really was. So then he sails, and he went around to the different kingdoms, potentates in Europe, and England, and Portugal, and France, and so on and so forth. Let me sail to the West Indies. I can bring the spices back. I know it's only 2,200 miles away. And the scholars there knew he was wrong, and so they were all turning him down. Leave. There's the door right there. Goodbye. But he was able to persuade, maybe because they liked him personally, Queen Ferdinand and Isabel, to give him 3 ships to sail to the west and try to find the West Indies. And so they did. Now, the sailors on board the ship, by the way, didn't want to go. And they even sabotaged the rudder so they could maybe get out of their trip there. But they fixed it, and so they sailed off anyway. So after 2 or 3 weeks on the ocean, they're about to mutiny, and Columbus makes a deal with him. Let's try for just 3 more days. If we don't find land by then, we'll turn around and we'll go back. But they did, for better or for worse, they come across the Bahamas. Okay, they go ashore. He claims it in the name of the king and queen of Spain, and the great marvelous development or terrible tragedy, depending on your viewpoint, begins to take place. The Europeans had gone through the Black Plagues. Okay, every 30, 40 years, another round of the Black Plagues would come along. So the survivors there had a very strong immune system, and so they were somewhat resistant to measles, somewhat resistant to other kinds of diseases, smallpox. Of course, the people in the New World had no such history in resisting disease in their systems, so they died by the thousands. And 3 years after he had arrived at the Bahamas, 90% of the population was decimated there in the Caribbean. Now, the part of it was cruel treatment, forcing the people to mine for gold, and they were tortured if they didn't come back with their quota of gold, and so on and so forth. That was part of the problem, but probably the majority of the people died as a result of disease. So Columbus said, maybe it could be celebrated, maybe it should be celebrated. That's kind of an open question. So that was one of history's major turning points. And backing up a little bit, back in 1453, the great fortress at Constantinople, which was the last vestige of the Roman Empire, fell apart because someone forgot to close and lock a key gate in the fortress wall. And Elon Musk sent out this kind of playful tweet, shows that this cartoon that shows a soldier in bed with the covers pulled up, his helmet on, with a little bubble over him showing his thoughts, and he's saying, "Did I remember to lock that gate last night?" And the answer is no, he didn't. And as a result, the Roman Empire collapses and Constantinople collapses. And that, by the way, set up a chain of events. When the Ottomans took over Constantinople, they then closed down the Silk Road, and there was no way to get the spices from the Far East anymore, and that was why Columbus and others were motivated to find the route sailing to the west. So it was a domino effect there. That gentleman had locked the door to the fortress might have survived, and historical events would have gone a different direction.
Very interesting. And it's also interesting how you were speaking of Columbus, how we judge history through different perspectives, I guess. Um, I want to bring us into current events. We know there's a situation going on in Iran, and also there's rumblings in Cuba. What is important to know about these current situations?
Well, that brings up, again, a lot of times one subject touches on another, which touches on another. But the whole big issue being debated up there in New York City in particular is what kind of economic system is the best, free enterprise or socialism, or you can call it communism if you want to. It's close to the same thing. Well, the Wall Street Journal made an observation. It was recently said those people who think that socialism might work apparently missed the last century, because it's been demonstrated over and over again it does not work. It fails. You take the entrepreneurs. Every major company started with entrepreneurs. Home Depot, or you could talk about the Bill Gates. You could talk about the entrepreneurs. Somebody with just a little bit of money and a good idea worked 16 hours a day, borrowed from their family, maybe went broke the first time. The founders of Home Depot went broke. Walt Disney, I think, went broke 2 or 3 or 4 times, but finally, with great perseverance, they come through, and then here's this large corporation with thousands of paychecks going out every week to thousands of people, billions of dollars being paid, and the society benefits enormously. Well, in socialism, it doesn't happen. There's an old saying coming out of Poland. In socialism, whether you stand up or whether you sit down, you get paid the same way. It does not reward success. It punishes success. So if you had a big successful company, they're going to come along and take away 90% of your profits. They're going to seize the means of production, and it falls apart. So Cuba and Venezuela both are examples of how socialism just flunked completely. 25 years ago, Venezuela was the most prosperous nation in all of Latin America. Huge amounts of natural resources, of petroleum and gas there. They were doing well. Socialism came in and took over, and they just wrecked the entire economy. Again, just big parts of it collapsing. Cuba is just in utter collapse. They are being propped up by the oil coming in from Venezuela. That is now halted. They used to have a lot of sugarcane that was being grown there. They used to have resorts and hotels and so on and so forth. Their entire economy is just a shambles. They're just hanging by a thread. Iran is a different situation there. They are a terrorist country, spreading terrorism throughout the Middle East and other nations throughout the world. They were spending all their money developing nuclear weapons, a very evil, corrupt organization. 90% of the people in Iran wanted a different government, but the 10% had the weapons. So they go onto the streets and try to protest, they'd be shot dead, and they would have their eyes removed, they would be tortured and then hung, etc., etc. So now they're in such a precarious situation with the help of the United States. There's a very good chance that they're going to collapse, and the United States needs to not only decapitate the snake, we need, of course, to find a very viable government to take the place of the old one, but it looks like their days are numbered, and it would be a great benefit to the people of Iran. Of course, they've already killed thousands, 20 or 30,000 have already been killed, but those that survive will have a much better government, I think, a democratic and free enterprise government, and will benefit, the whole world will benefit as a result.
Again, the book is Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters. Last question, is there going to be a book 3, or are you currently working on anything that we should know about?
Well, yes. Now, my wife, when I first had the idea of the book some 12 years ago, I was still working full time. I had 5 children, all 5 of them were still at home, and I had a wife who needed attention. Well, I've since retired. Okay, my children have moved on. Okay, but I still have a wife who needs attention. She told me that if I started another book, you spend all your time in this 4-foot square world writing that book, it's going to be a bad situation. So I do not. I started a 3rd book with a different subject. The 3rd book is the hushed-up murders of famous people. They murdered big and got away with it. And there are a long list of famous people who were murdered, and there's a big question about what happened. Marilyn Monroe would be at the top of the list. Natalie Wood would be there also. Sonny Liston was obviously murdered by the mob, and Jimmy Hoffa, pretty certain murdered by the mob. And in questionable situations, it's very possible, you can't say it's probable, but it's very possible that J. Edgar Hoover himself was murdered. That someone slipped in. He had a lot of enemies. He had these dossiers he was using to blackmail people. That someone slipped into his house, and who would never think that they could get away with it, and put poison in his toothpaste, and that the poison, he was collapsed one morning in his bedroom, and he was buried without an autopsy. And right after he died, agents went over there to his office and scooped up all of these files, all of these dossiers. And a lot of people wanted him dead and gone. So again, you can only say it's a serious possibility that he too was murdered, but it's worth thinking about. And we're going to, of course, John Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, which I think I'm going to, but there's a whole long list of people that have some great issues and great questions about their death. When someone gets to be very successful and they're high on the pyramid, there are a lot of people that want to replace them, a lot of people in competition with them. They sometimes become the presidents of the United States, being an obvious example. A lot of people want them gone, and so terrible things can happen.
Are you familiar with a book that's out of print now called A Cast of Killers?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so that book was really fascinating to me, and I don't think it was a very popular book, but it might be a murder you would want to look into. It was a silent film actor who, I'll just say it like this. A silent film actor, there was a gentleman who was going to write an autobiography for a movie producer named King Vidal, and he was looking around in King Vidal's attic and came across a hidden compartment that had a diary, and it turned out this producer solved the mystery years before, and there's a reason why he never revealed what had actually happened. But it was a big murder in its day, and I forget the name of the actor, but it was a silent film actor.
Taylor, but I think it sounds like the murder of Mr. Taylor, and yes, it was the mother of this young actress may have shot him and killed him, and they, and there was it was never solved, but that was a famous murder back in the 1920s. That sounds what we're talking about. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And he was actually gay, and they had made it up that he was a ladies' man and all of that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
Fascinating book. So.
Go ahead.
So we've been speaking with Jared Knott. Excellent book, Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, book 1, and there's also a book 2. And you can find out more information at tinyblundersbigdisasters.com. Well, Jared, when your next book comes out, I hope we can have you back. This has been excellent. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. It's great. I found it very enjoyable.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us this week. I hope you can return and join us again next time. In the meantime, if you can, please subscribe to The Bruce Collins Show on YouTube, and you can join us on the Bruce Collins Show Facebook page. Take care, everybody. Good night.
Spark, the voice of the bear ignites the dark. Ideas soaring, breaking apart. It's the Bruce Collins Show. It's the Bruce Collins Show. Let stories flow. You'll feel the mind. Leave the world behind. The barrel of broadcasting keeps the dream everlasting.
That's a wrap, falafelites. This has been a Bad Yodeler production. Good night.